So let's transition to the topic at hand tonight, and that is imagining a preferred future. That let me just do one thing here. That if we are not co-creating our own future with God and the people that we love, then we're going to be the victim of somebody else's future. And you can clearly see that there's a whole bunch of stuff that's not in our control. And I think, if anything, the pandemic has clearly showed that, and all sorts of, natural disasters and even aspects of our own health. We're not in control. And what I want to look at tonight, though, is to think about how we can plan and design and achieve stuff, and not just simply be totally responsive to the world that's around us, but saying, this is what I want to accomplish, this is what I want to do, and always holding somewhat lightly to that, because if you really try to possess the future, it has a way of turning around and revealing to you that you aren't in charge. That can get pretty miserable. But being able to take those proactive steps, and a big part of what the search committee will be working on, particularly when we get back together and can have the conversations, is doing some of this work in terms of what's the preferred future of St. Peter's as a collective community. But tonight, what I really want to look at is, what's your preferred future? And the way to think about that is to imagine, what would life be like if you were at your very best. And we were exploring that the last couple of weeks, those times when you've been at your best, and to ponder, so what was I doing when I was at my best? And then what kind of world would you create if you were at your best, working on making your wishes come true? And so that's a big piece of what I want to look at tonight. And so most of tonight, what I want to do is actually lead you on a guided imagery exercise. And just notice the language that I use. I'm going to call this a guided imagery, or some of you may call it a guided meditation. But guided imagery, for some people, they would think, well, that's just sort of visualization. And maybe that's true for some people. But I'll tell you that I'm not actually too good at guided visualization. When you ask me, create a picture in your mind, most of the time what I get in my mind is kind of a half-developed Polaroid. It's not very clear. And if you remember those old Polaroid pictures,
what's that?
But they're kind of green as they're starting to.
Never seen such a thing.
Yeah, I used that as an illustration with a bunch of clergy, and there are some younger clergy, and they're going, what's a Polaroid? I began to feel my age, and I do have a few more hairs on the top of my head, Joseph, than you do, but they're old hair. So anyway, you get the thing is here, though, is to ponder, because I do have a very fertile imagination. It may not just be simply visual, and that's and we'll be doing very similar kind of exercise next week, on next Sunday, when we look at forgiveness. So it's really guided imagery, and to get you to wonder how you actually imagine. And I'm only really just beginning to get to know the people at St. Peter's. And so I couldn't answer this, and I don't want you to answer this question in terms of specific people. But who do you think has the biggest imagination at St. Peter's? What do you reckon? Who do you think has the biggest imagination? Now, some of you will probably be thinking it's the children. But I tell you, I don't think that's true. I don't think they haven't practiced enough to have the biggest imagination. I'll tell you who's got the biggest imagination at St. Peter's. It's the person who worries the most. Because if you think about it, worry is pure imagination. I would say it's a misuse of the imagination. But if you know how to worry, then you will know how to do this guided imagery exercise. All you got to do is find your worrier, that piece of machinery inside your head that you use to worry, and that's what we're going to use. Put it to use in terms of imagining a preferred future. When you think about it, worry is imagining a future you don't want. And actually, worry is always about the future. You may have learned it in the past, and you may have learned to worry about something, but to worry, you've got to project something into the future. And particularly for worry, you've just got to project something you really don't want. So we can find the piece of machinery that you do worry with, and we're going to use that to get you to imagine your preferred future. And so I just invite you, this is being recorded, by the way, so you'll be able to go back and listen to it if you want to, or sort of redo the exercise. For those of you who are taking notes, I think it'd be easier right at the moment if you just sort of focus on the exercise rather than take notes. I'm going to invite you to go on a journey of discovery. And you can maybe take a deep breath. Just let yourself relax. And as you relax, to remember the stories you told of yourself at your best. And those stories in the interviews and the stories I've been inviting you to remember, particularly this last week, to think of those times of when you've been at your best. When you've been in your zone. When life seemed to flow from you. You may have been putting in a lot of hard work, but it also had a sense of being effortless. And you may have had a part of that experience being an awareness in some strange and kind of wonderful way, how you were part of something greater than you. That you're tapping into a creativity, for example, that just seemed to be beyond you, and that you were getting to participate in that. So I wonder what you remember when you remember yourself at your very best. And you think of those stories. And I also wonder how you remember those Do you see yourself? Is it a picture? Or can you hear what you are saying and what other people are saying? Maybe what you feel in your body, your senses. And so I invite you to remember. And that word remember means to put yourself back together. To remember yourself at your very best. And I wonder what other stories come to your mind when you remember yourself at your very best. And they seem to be linked together. Similar experiences of being at your best. In your zone. And as you think of yourself at your best, I wonder what comes to your mind when you think of those things that you love to do. Of taking a walk, of cooking, of working with your hands, or working with your mind. Solving puzzles. And as you think of these things that you love to do, even the very simple things that give you such pleasure and delight, you think of those as metaphors for you at your best. And that when you're at your best, there are elements of these things that you love to do. And so I wonder what you remember when you remember yourself at your best, doing what you love. And at these times, I wonder whether you can also see that they were times when you were living authentically, consistent with your values. In fact, when you were at your best, you were actually manifesting your values in the world in a way that was congruent with who you are. And that sense of satisfaction and harmony that comes from being at your best and congruent with your values. And we've also talked about those things that get you mad. Those things that help you identify what your deep values are, the prophetic edge of your life, part of your calling. And so I wonder what you remember and who you remember when you remember yourself at your very best, doing what you love, making a difference in this world. And I wonder if you at your best were to set about working on making your wishes come true, of creating the life that you would like to live in. And you may imagine a very specific kind of life, but just check out below the specificity of what the life represents, the timeless qualities that are contained within it. And so I wonder what kind of a life you would create for yourself, for the people that you love, if every day you got to be at your best, living authentically, congruent with your values. And you can see the things that you would co-create with God. The world that you would create. And I do wonder what kind of a world you'd create by being at your best. And you could go into the future, maybe in 5 years' time, when that life and that world are fully formed. And as you wander around in that world that you've created, you can imagine meeting up with an old friend, maybe someone you haven't seen for 20 years, maybe someone you went to school with, and your friend asks you, what have you been up to? And you get to tell your friend about this world that you have created by being at your best, doing what you love. And you notice the excitement in your voice as you're telling your friend. As you share with your friend what you've been doing. And how it's been so fulfilling. To be at your best. Doing what you love. And how you've made the world a better place. A better place for you. And a better place for the people that you love. A place that you find to be a blessing. And as you tell your friend about this world that you've created, your friend would say, wow, that's amazing. Tell me, how did you get started on this journey? And you remember back to that day when you knew you just had to take a step and go for it. You didn't quite know how it was going to work out, but you knew you just had to do it. And so you took that step and stepped out. And you remember how it turned out. And how you felt encouraged to take another step. And along the way, you remember some of the steps that you took that didn't turn out so well. And you remember the people who supported you, who encouraged you, who believed in you. And you remember with gratitude for the people who have blessed you on this journey. Who helped you when times were difficult. When a step didn't work out as planned. And as you wander in this world that you've created by being at your best, doing what you love, manifesting your values in the world. Allow a metaphor for you at your best to form in your mind. Don't force it or make it happen. Just allow it to form. And if the first metaphor that comes into your mind is not that appealing to you, that's okay. Just let it float on by and wait for another one to arise. But don't be surprised if the old one keeps coming back. Just invite it into your consciousness and ask it what it has to teach you, what it wants to share with you. And before it wanders off, invite it to share its wisdom with you. And just allow yourself to be conscious of the metaphor, of you at your best, in your preferred future. To enjoy the sense of harmony, peace, joy, and love that is associated when you remember the metaphor. And notice how the metaphor also remembers you and calls you to mind. And you can think of that metaphor kind of like a logo for your life. We think of company logos. You see the logo and you're reminded of a whole lot of things about the company. You think of the metaphor as a logo for your life. A word, a picture, a sound, a way to convey the essence of who you are. And you can test your metaphor, see its impact. Just set the metaphor aside and think about something else you're going to do, maybe something you're going to do tomorrow, or that you did yesterday. Just let yourself be distracted. And when you're good and properly distracted, just allow the metaphor to come back into your mind. And notice how the metaphor brings with it that awareness of peace and joy, love, a sense of assurance of who you are, whose you are. And so when that metaphor is fully formed in your mind, just allow your attention to come back into the room, into our call. And if you do have a piece of paper, it may be helpful to make a note of a couple of things. One of them would be the first step that you took to create that preferred future, and who it was that was blessing you on your journey. Because the chances are, as you embark on this journey of life, you may want to get that person's blessing. You might actually need that person's blessing in your life. And sometimes doing this kind of work, what you were aware of during the meditation is almost like a dream. And if you don't write it down straight away, like if you don't write a dream down straight away, you'll forget them very quickly. And just make a note of the metaphor too. In fact, if we were doing this in a class, I would have had a whole lot of markers and paper and felt tips and what have you, and got you to draw a picture of the metaphor. And here's what I'm thinking, folks. I think we're going to do what we did a couple of weeks ago when we just ended the call right now, in the sense of, I think you've got some things to ponder, maybe some things to write down, to make note of. And I don't want to mess that up with a whole lot of talking and analyzing it and all of that kind of stuff. I think I'd rather just leave you with that experience and for you to enjoy it for the night and sleep on it and ponder. And in the next few meditations and reflections in the 50 days, we'll have some steps on the next steps in terms of working with this picture of the preferred future, and particularly your metaphor for who you are, whose you are, and why you're on the face of the earth. So I wish you all a really good night. Many blessings.
Good night, Rod.
Good night.